Welcome, folks, to our third LinkedIn Live. We are Codingscape, and we're hosting a new series of live technology talks with the humans behind the machines at Codingscape. As I like to say, we've got mad skills for mad projects. That's modern application development. We want to get real with technology and product leaders about building software, growing senior engineering teams, and making technology choices the right way. These live talks skip the jargon, move past the pressure in the meeting rooms, and dissolve office politics so we can get straight to the real talk of software development and share insights that will make your development decisions easier. I'm your host, Lauren Carris. I'm product and learning leader at Codingscape. I've spent the last few years developing people, teams, and learning products, and I love helping founders bring their ideas to life. I also love tinkering with new tools and helping push innovation forward in user friendly ways. Today, our guest has had the pleasure of tinkering with quite a few toys and pushing innovation at Codingscape. We are pleased to have Zachary Burkett, Codingscape engineer, join us today for a super exciting AI talk. Zach, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah. So I'm Zach Burkett. As Lauren said, I'm an engineer at Codingscape, and I get to play with what I think are some of the more fun tools. So I'd agree on that front. I've been a long-time developer. I've worked at a lot of different domains, but over the past few years, I primarily working with machine learning. So that's my bread and butter right now.
Awesome. Tell us how you got into machine learning.
So the first time I played with machine learning was quite a long time ago, and it wasn't very seriously. It was more of a toy sort of interest, and I think a lot of people experienced it back then this way. Um, so there was a time where this type of model called a generative adversarial network was very popular, and basically these were being used to generate pictures, but not like what we have today. They were not very good, so to speak. But like, say you're trying to generate pictures of flowers, that would be like, oh yeah, those kind of look like flowers. I can see it. But so I had, I'm not exactly sure how I stumbled upon that, but I was playing around with that at the time. I had a computer that I could sort of run some of these small models, but had no idea what that was really gonna, turn out to be, especially over the last couple of years.
Awesome. At Codingscape, we have this really cool concept called the bench. And this is where our team members who are not actively on a project or have a little bit of extra capacity, they come together and they upskill, innovate, and create. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what you've done on the bench related to AI.
Yeah, so the bench time is very interesting because as we work with a lot of different clients, you're not always on all the time. So we have this opportunity where, as you said, we do some upskilling and maybe some behind the scenes projects, and we've developed some rather interesting things during that time, and also upskilling a lot of our developers into these new technologies that may have not been exposed to it previously, and seeing them create these outstanding things on the bench time. But we've worked on things such as document parsing, code generation from drawing sketches, with custom trained models, not off the shelf. Um, there's been a lot of interesting developments there, using machine learning in augmented reality scenarios. That's been quite interesting.
I love it. We also work with a lot of clients. And so I want to turn to chat just a little bit about some of the insights you've gained, maybe some of the opportunities along the way. But before we get into client based work, tell me what some of the best applications of AI are in modern enterprise kind of business.
Um, That's an interesting question because it's quite a broad domain. So, this technology has really been used in enterprise for quite a long time, but not exactly in a way that's so customer focused or so employee focused. Um, Automation in machines, object detection, that sort of thing has been kind of happening in the background. Medical imaging with some data processing. This sort of stuff has been pervasive in those domains for quite a long time, but it's now starting to bubble into more generalized approach, and now we have language models that are able to work with a lot of data that we use on a day-to-day basis. So these sorts of tools are, um, becoming very useful for a lot of enterprise businesses in a lot of domains, especially language models, just because of simply how applicable they are to a lot of different tasks. But these things have been kind of been in certain domains for quite a while now, but just not as widely known.
So let's move away from enterprise and think, just your average company that might reach out to us and say, hey, we need some help. We want you to help us build some AI or take our AI model to the next level. Tell me in those cases, businesses that come, what are some of the best applications you've seen more recently? You named a couple of, more historic examples of AI and machine learning being used. And now that we're starting to gain some speed, what are some really interesting examples?
So Duolingo has recently released a big update. I'm a huge language nerd, so I love learning languages, and I never thought to I don't want to belittle it too much, but not too highly of Duolingo. Although I used it, but it definitely wasn't the source to get you fluid, mostly because of structured quizzes and stuff. But the introduction of language models into your language learning course, you can really go into that like immersion sort of area. So that's been a very because they were, that company's been around. They had an existing software that didn't utilize these technologies and seems to have adapted very well to not only just kind of shoving it in, but actually improving their core product through being able to have the immersive conversations. Um, some things also I've seen, probably can't speak on too many of the details, but using, like, privately trained models to talk to you about medical information. And, so that's been quite interesting, and on the technical side, you don't really wanna be sending those things off to, like, AI or, Anthropic or things like that. So, there's companies out there that are learning how to build their own models so they can serve, privately. Um, there's a lot of interesting things like that. Some cool photo tools, I really like seeing, sometimes I take a photo on my phone now and it can, easily remove one person in the background. It's a very small thing, but, it's nice.
Yeah, for sure. How about some of, I hate to say the worst application of it, but like some really not useful or maybe too expensive for the value. So some not good applications of AI.
I could quickly actually two things come to mind on both sides of that. So one thing with the rise of language models is of course there's a lot of hype around it. Everyone wants a chatbot these days, but the question is like, does that actually provide a value? And in some case, depending on how the chatbot works, it's incredible value. But there's a lot of times where it just doesn't feel that was necessary to go ahead with and doesn't improve the user experience in some way. On the other side, on cost, sometimes a lot of companies are learning how to build their own models, and there's kind of runaway costs that can go with that, where maybe just you know using something off the shelf or someone else's API might have been the cost solution there. Um, yeah,
Yeah, tricky when you get into IP and really want to own all of the intellectual property.
yes, yep,
So at Codingscape, we've definitely played with a couple of different chatbots and some solutions for different clients. We have a really interesting question coming in. What are features of chatbots that are incredible, and how should we think about the difference between good versus bad chatbot experiences?
sure. So there's like the generalist chatbot, which is like example is like Claude or Chat GPT, where you tend to use that like it's like a knowledge base. You can query it, you can dive in, change the level of responses, so you can really get the information. But it's almost like a really powerful search engine in some ways, and it's capable in a lot of other ways. But that sort of thing has been done. So if you're making a chatbot, that's not really what you're making. Is just copying that. So why are you making a new chatbot is a good question to ask. And often it's because either A, you have some extra information that these existing chatbots don't understand. And so maybe it's specific information for your business. Maybe it's, a customer support bot that needs to know, just things about your company, or even just an internal assistant. Um, or, uh, or you want to use it for something completely like a different task where it actually performs actions on your behalf. So that's like a sort of a customization thing where you can build your own chatbot that can maybe use tools behind the scenes and then pop up things that aren't exactly chat. They might show you like buttons that you could click. It's like, okay, here's the results. Click approve or decline, those sorts of things. All sorts of customizations that are beyond just the general like Oracle that are these massive large language models.
Ooh, I love that. Beyond the Oracle. So
And
cool.
Oracle's great sometimes, but sometimes you don't need the oracle, you just need someone that knows what the job is.
Fair point. I'd love to know, when do people think they need an AI, but they actually don't? I mean, you hinted at some of it, but I think in the craze for, stepping up to innovation and making sure that you're competitive with all of your other, players in the field, you just kind of tack on AI. But maybe share some use cases where people often think they need it and they really don't.
So let me ponder that for a second. So traditionally, how we build a lot of systems is like a lot of handwritten code, right? At least behind the scenes. Um, and it's a set of instructions, and in businesses, it tends to be, we call it business logic. It's the logic of the business, and it's very, um, rigid and deterministic is like the key word. So like what's going to happen. Well, ideally bugs and stuff, but we try to avoid that. We write lots of tests and things, and we ideally want to know everything that happens along the way. Um, for certain types of problems, that's a very poor way of going about it. And a common example is like, okay, give a developer that can write all your business logic this problem. Ask them now to write the code to detect if a picture is a cat or a dog. With writing all those deterministic rules, that's a very, very challenging problem, if not near impossible. So there's certain types of problems that you might encounter that are very challenging to implement that way, or if you implement it that way, will be very costly and take a long time. But now we have these new computing models through machine learning and AI, which can sort of they're not programmed by instruction necessarily, although you can write prompts and instructions, but they're really programmed by data. They see a lot of data and they learn how that data works. And then you can sort of uh, use the shape of all that data to do your calculations instead of having to write all these individual rules. So the abstract is, if you're finding a problem that's very, very challenging to hand instruct, basically maybe try a different data driven computing model, which might be a little bit too abstract for the answer, but that's kind of how the level I see it from. um, there's even like a even higher level one is just like processing massive amounts of documents with certain instructions. It's like, okay, we have these files. We want to take this little bit of data out of here. There's all these files that come in from someone else. We need to extract that data. We need to collate it together. Then that goes somewhere in the other process. Instead of handwriting that, you could just have like a loop with a language model and prompt saying, hey, these documents are going to come in. I need you to find these spots. Goes back. And then once you have that, you just keep running like through a bunch of instructions. Um, but if it's just sort of something that can be done in a deterministic way and it's really not that challenging to do, you probably don't need it. It's probably safer and easier to you know, just write a few lines of codes that are perfect instructions.
And maybe cheaper.
And certainly cheaper, yeah. Yeah, there's cost involved with these things too. And
Mhm.
probabilistic computing, which is how a lot of these models work, is if you ask the same question twice, it might not answer the same way twice. There's a little bit of randomness associated with it, which is good, but if you have a system that doesn't work with that, that might be something to consider.
That's really insightful. There's a question in the chat. I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but we'll see. Is it true that LLMs are the loosest compression algorithm for text to date?
Lossiest.
Is it
I don't
lossiest?
know if they will be. I don't know if I'd go to say the absolute lossiest text compression. I'm probably sure I could think of some other lossier ways that aren't as good. But it is true that LLMs are largely compression mechanisms. A large amount of their structure ends up going into these massive data compression pipelines. Um, and that's why they can seemingly remember so much from data that they've read without being honestly that large in size. Like for, a few gigabytes in size, you can download a model that can recite almost any information you want from the internet. It's kind of ridiculous. Maybe not verbatim, but very, very close. Um, and without going down the rabbit hole too deeply into the research, compression keeps coming up as a theme in intelligence. There's seemingly some deeper connections between deep compression and higher cognition.
Okay, let's back up a little bit and explain what is lossy and why does it
Oh,
matter?
sorry. Yeah. So
No, that's okay.
lossy. It's easier to start with lossless. So let's think of lossless compression. You have something that's like this size, and you can compress it to something smaller. And maybe this is data, like text data, and you want to transmit it over the internet, and you want to get it as small as possible to save data. And on the other side, they can decompress it to read the text, and they get the exact same text that you got back. No, there was no loss of data. It was a completely lossless compression. You were able to compress it into a smaller format and then back out without losing anything in the process. But there's other forms of compression which are called lossy compression, where there is data lost in the reconstruction, but it's designed to be in a way that the reconstruction is very similar to the original. A common example is like JPEG imagery. So these are like JPEG images. They are what's considered a lossy compression method. So if you take like an original image, save it as JPEG, and look at it, it's not going to look as good, but it looks pretty good. And that's kind of the idea with lossy compression, that you would be able to reconstruct something, the intended message that you could do. And neural networks are incredibly lossy, but their reconstruction is very high. It's very, very impressive.
Fascinating. You know, Zach, I have to share something with you. We had an internship program, as you recall, and we did an evaluation of that internship program, and there were several students who actually named you as one of the most insightful, most inspiring team members that they connected with. They wrote, I quote, felt smarter every time I spoke with Zach. And I have to share that I feel the same when you explain something like lossy, and when when I join the AI practice chats, it's really helpful to have someone who's so passionate about the topic, but also knowledgeable, explain it in really useful ways. So thanks for sharing the explanation.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
I wanted to share another cool thing about Codingscape. I mentioned the AI practice and the practice meeting. This is separate from the bench. It's a community of practice, rather, where a lot of folks come together. Some are experts like you, some are actively tackling a problem, some are like me, a non-expert in AI, but just curious and want to learn. I'd love to hear from you what value that kind of a practice community has provided.
Yeah, so there's a lot of value there. So at CodingSape we have multiple different practices, much for every domain that we practice in. And the intent for this is to kind of get everyone that works in that slice together frequently, because we might be working on different projects with different clients, or you know, um, and we're all gaining insights while we're working. And there's different levels of these insights that we're gaining. So we'll get together and we can basically share and present everything that we're learning. Um, what's the state of the art in that, what's the tricks of the trade, so to speak. So we all upskill together. Um, there's also some other benefits of sometimes, we may have external speakers or researchers or developers in certain domains come and, talk to us and, maybe share some information that way. But the goal is really that we all are practicing in this domain slice and we're all upskilling together with the modern tricks of the trade, pretty much.
I love it. I love the practice meetings. I love learning there. And I think it's a really good model for a lot of companies, no matter what their practices might be, but especially for anyone who's really chasing after that innovation or actively delivering around innovation, to have a little bit of breathing room where you can come together as a practice community to actively, collaboratively learn and solve new problems. I would love to hear now a little bit about some inspiration. So, we're going to move to a little bit of a lightning round. And I
Okay.
have four questions for you. The first is, what AI tools should everyone be using or at least familiarizing themselves with?
Everyone should be using or at least be familiar with one of the top and large language models. There's a few, but that come to mind is like Claude Sonnet or ChatGPT 4.0 or the O1 preview. These are very capable for a lot of different jobs, and you just might find it helping you with something. So just kind of get familiar.
A follow-up to that, if someone were unfamiliar and truly had a menu, so it's Claude, it's ChatGPT,
Mhm.
whatever's coming in their search engine, how would you recommend they go about choosing which one?
Um, Well, I'd say try all of them and see what one you like. There's certain people uh, are very beholden to their favorite LLM these days because of what they feel like their personality is, and some others don't care that much, but care about you know the structure of the output or something like that. So they'll all be kind of familiar with how you interact with them, but you might pick your favorite flavor over time.
I love that answer. I love actually putting the same prompt in a couple of different examples and seeing how it is, nuanced and what it reveals. We'll get to some Q&A from the chat here in just a minute, but I want to go through a couple other lightning round questions. What's a current AI project that you are working on outside of work?
Largely, I have been working on some robotic stuff lately, so it's sort of a domain of AI called reinforcement learning. Although some other traditional things will are kind of going in there. Not to call that RL isn't traditional; it's probably been around longer. But learn to make robots walk and stuff. Is actually one in the back corner over there. Navigate around the world, avoid objects, that sort of stuff.
Awesome. And what about your own inspiration? What's something you're reading or watching or consuming that's helping to inspire you in your daily life?
Um, just seeing Andre Karpathy keep going ahead and leaving 2 mega AI corps just to keep teaching us how to make this stuff. I'm pretty much just eagerly awaiting for his next blog post or video.
We'll all have to keep an eye on him, huh? We've got another question from the chat. Have you made any GPTs? And if so, what do they do? And what are some good examples?
So I think they're referring to the GPT store on chat like on ChatGPT and OpenAI's website. So what these are like little custom configurations of their ChatGPT model. I've played around with it a little bit. I haven't made anything like any real products, but I wanted to understand how it worked a bit. And effectively, these are configurations for custom RAGs or RAGs, as we call them, which are retrieval augmented generation systems. And the idea with these is you have some sort of chatbot, and then you also have like these documents as reference off to the side. And during conversation, the chatbot can sort of like query them or go like read them or access a database, however you want to think of it, to get little snippets of it to be able to inform its responses from a source that you provide. So that's one customization that you're allowed to do with these GPTs is provide a lot of these documents for that. And then you could also, since ChatGPT is integrated with a bunch of their other tools, that you can select which tools that like your GPT has access to, and um, you can write like a secret system prompt to tell it who it is and maybe describe what its behavior will be like and say, the user's going to ask for this and then you're going to call Dolly, their image generation program, and then, you know, return it. So it's a configuration around that. There's no custom training involved as far as I'm aware, but it's a really nice RAG system with tools.
Yeah, I've made a couple. They're all private. I haven't published them yet to the general public, but it's really fun to create some boundaries around the types of responses it might deliver, the kind of tone you might want it to, or even to play with like characters almost, right? So you
Mhm.
can really shape them and have a lot of fun with that too. Awesome. Um, Tell us a little bit about what it would look like to do a like a technical evaluation of an AI solution. Let's say a company was curious about how they're performing, or they just wanted, a second look. I know you've done some of these projects before, so what would that be like? And from a technical perspective, and roughly how long would it take? Is it something you could do like overnight? Would it take a week? I know there's lots of dependencies, but I think it'd be great for folks to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of depend on the breadth of you know what the implementation is or would be, depending on if there's something already there or not. We've experienced both, where sometimes a client is coming to us and they have a little bit of something and they're asking, how is this? Where does it need to go? Or maybe they're asking before there's anything, and it can vary a lot. But the real question is, what is the goal here? What is the value add? And designing metrics is probably one of the trickiest parts of effective machine learning. There's sort of like, well, I won't want to cut effective, but applied machine learning. There's sort of more research where your benchmarks are more data oriented, just of how well it fits the data. But then in operations, your evaluations are more about, how does that impact your value? And often, since these, at least in behind the scenes usage, these are often used in like data pipelines. It's often a measure of throughput. So you have to figure out, how do you measure the throughput? How long does that take? And then you can kind of, once you get the picture of what they're trying to accomplish and where the value add is, then you can start proposing some solutions to of how you get there and actually measure it against a real metric.
Man, that's such a good way to think about it. KPIs, measurement, like what are you trying to achieve? So often, folks or businesses come and they're like, just evaluate it. And you're like, evaluate what? What do we want to look at? So, really framing what is their goal? What are they concerned about? What do we want to measure against is really, really important.
And these tools
Um,
are often like a black box, so um, there's a lot of faith sometimes in certain value where you place a black box in your processes, right? So it's very important to have these sorts of metrics on how you understand impact of these sorts of systems.
yeah, yeah, really good use case. Okay, I have one sort of fun question here. Let's think about a real life example, maybe something that, hit the news where something was just like off the guardrails. There were responses that didn't really go as appropriately as, they imagined, and it just like went bad. Can you think of an example like that and maybe tell us a little bit about how to safeguard against it, or like how do you shape something around it? Because, there is this like dark concern of AI, like, the robots are going to take over. And then you see some example of that and everybody freaks out. So can you kind of shape that for us?
Sure. So what I think you're referring to is what people have colloquially started calling hallucinations in these models, and they're quite interesting. I can't really think of any particular funny one off the top of my head, but I've encountered many. I've seen them, um, and these could be potentially quite harmful. And it's been interesting that these have popped up because the way that these systems are designed is they're almost like the behavior is designed pretty deliberately, and these safety mechanisms that are trained in behind the scenes are getting better and better, but these hallucinations still keep occurring. So how people typically deal with them is just testing these really robust prompts with bold instructions on do not, edge case, always, explanation for something to always do, but to really lay out the the guardrails in the prompt. Um, but maybe I won't get too in the weeds with this, but this is exciting me recently. There's been some recent work that we might have figured out what these are under the hood. Um, and it might be a kind of a problem no more. I don't want to be held to that, but there's some very interesting research happening right now that might mechanistically point to, like, yeah, hallucination is happening right now, and we can stop it.
Zach, that's like the worst tease ever.
Well, I still haven't read through all the literature yet as well that's coming out with it. It's still very fresh, but we'll see. It's very exciting. There's constant things happening behind the scene that's you may never hear about as a user that's making these things safer and more capable just day by day.
Yeah, no doubt. I think there was one example of the car dealership and someone, hacked the chat to
Oh
actually get
yes,
a free car. I think that was, yeah, the really common, or the one that made the news, at least, that a lot of people heard about.
I remember that one. That was very funny.
Yeah, and good for that person, honestly. um, there's another question we have from the chat. What are you most excited about in the future of AI?
Oh, that's a big one. Um, there's a lot of things I'm excited about, but they're more like along the way. But I'm excited for us to kind of be able to know more about just what's going on in the universe. We've gotten pretty far, with ourselves. The way I like to describe it is we've amplified might very far as like a human species. We've built lots of very large machines, sent rockets to the moon that hardly had any compute power on them, that sort of thing. Mostly just using our human brain, but with might that is significantly larger than what a human does. And now with these models, we're started hitting the other side of that equation. Um, who knows what we're going to be able to understand about our reality. Uh, things that we might not even be on our radar yet. Is obviously curing diseases, countless diseases, just by understanding them better with tools like alpha protein, alpha fold. Like, turns out some diseases are really easy to cure if you just know exactly the shape of them. Uh, things like that. But I think we're just gonna understand so much more about this little blue rock and our place in it and place in the world, and understand more about what's going on around us. I think it's gonna be beautiful.
I agree. I think so too. I think what I'm excited about is to learn maybe how much we don't know about learning. We have a lot of assumptions about cognition and the developmental process. And I know a lot of educators, especially, have really strong opinions and concerns about humans interacting with, for example, chatbots and AI, and how that reshapes or potentially limits development and learning. But I'm really hopeful and excited to see maybe what it uncovers and unveils that we didn't even know about before.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, it is always enlightening to chat with you, Zach, about all things, but especially AI. So thank you for being so patient with my questions and for being so insightful. Always fun. For everyone else who's listening, we hope that you will join us next time for another LinkedIn Live session where we will be chatting about even more interesting things. Who knows what will come up next? Please connect with us on LinkedIn if you are curious about any kind of case studies, reports, or guides. You'll be able to find them through our website, but also connect with humans to learn more about the work that we do. If you're interested in any kind of a roadmap review, technical audit, and getting some insights from awesome people like Zach and our CTO who really dig in to help you better understand your tech stack, your code, your development capabilities, and even help you plan for the future, we are here to help. So connect with us, and we will see you next time.